In 1921, Red Army commander Mikhail Frunze left Kharkov for Ankara. As ambassador extraordinary, Frunze's task was to negotiate a friendship agreement between Soviet Ukraine and independent Turkey. At the time, both existed more on paper than in reality. The Turkish War of Independence and Russian Civil War had not yet ended in their favor. The Soviet-Ukrainian meeting was therefore as much an act of mutual faith and will as the diplomatic coming together of two sovereign states. In a speech, Frunze projected a new vision for the aspiring countries and the Black Sea region they shared. Quote, "It is true that the Black Sea unfortunately is not in our hands, and therefore, instead of facilitating our relations, it obstructs them. But, along with the Turkish peoples, we strongly believe that this obstacle will soon vanish, and the Black Sea will become our internal sea, where the flags of the friendly and united Turkey, Ukraine, Russia, and the Caucasian republics will fly free." The two parties signed the agreement, and the Ukrainian delegation set sail for home. Their baggage was lighter than when they arrived. Frunze had secretly delivered 1.1 million gold rubles to Mustafa Kemal's forces. This was one installment of the 10 million rubles in armaments Moscow promised in support of the nationalist struggle. Today, the Soviet contribution to Turkish independence is still recognized in Taksim Square's Monument of the Republic. Behind Mustafa Kemal stands a figure ostensibly modeled after the Soviet ambassador. The Soviet Union and Turkey's interwar partnership was one of the great diplomatic pivots of modern Eurasian history. Whereas the previous 3 centuries had witnessed many clashes between the Ottoman and Russian armies, their Kemalist and Bolshevik successors renounced rivalry and embraced cooperation against their common foes, whom they called Western imperialists. Contemporary observers portrayed Moscow and Ankara's alliance as an aberration that would buckle under the partners' ideological differences. Against these expectations, Soviet-Turkish alignment in fact expanded in the 20s and 30s, acquiring new cultural, political, and economic dimensions. Collaborations included Sergei Yutkevich's 1934 documentary film, The Heart of Turkey, Ankara, which gives this presentation many of its visuals. For all their differences, the Bolshevik and Kemalist projects shared certain goals, such as breakneck industrialization, mass literacy, female emancipation and education, and the effacement of their predecessors' legacies. A cohort of multilingual scholars have begun to study these convergences in greater depth, but the scholarship has yet to recognize the role played by science and environment in Soviet-Turkish exchange. Frunze, after calling for the Black Sea to join Turkish and Soviet peoples, acknowledged the new friends' troubling lack of familiarity with one another. Quote, "Unfortunately, it is necessary to admit that despite being such close neighbors, we know each other very little. Our mutual interests require that this wall of mistrust and ignorance now disappear." End quote. This presentation explores the Soviet Union and Turkey's efforts to tear down this wall through cooperation in the sciences. Geopolitics created the opportunity for exchange, but it was the country's shared demographics and environments that provided the content. I argue that Soviet-Turkish scientific cooperation benefited from its participants' genuinely aligned research interests in linguistics, agriculture, and geology, as well as their mutual conviction that science should play a muscular role in society and politics. For an insider's vantage point, the presentation draws on primary sources such as newspapers, academic journals, and most of all, archival materials produced by the Commission for the Promotion of Scientific Relations with Turkey. The following section will discuss the origins of this commission before diving into its activities. Turkish and Soviet scientists and educators had begun to interact in earnest in the mid-1920s, following Turkish independence. In 1925, for instance, the Turkish Minister of Agriculture, Mehmet Sabri, and a delegation of veterinarians visited the Soviet Union. Then, in 1926, the renowned Orientalist Vasily Bartold lectured at the University of Istanbul. Later that year, a delegation of Turkish educators, led by Nafi Atuf and Ridvan Nafiz, toured Soviet school facilities. Meanwhile, the agronomist Pyotr Zhukovsky took 3 research trips to Turkey, publishing his findings in a 707-page survey of Anatolian agriculture. These encounters whet the appetite for a deeper, more systemic cooperation in the sciences. As with so many developments in modern Turkish history, it was Mustafa Kemal who turned idea into reality. Kemal and his colleagues, who were then reforming the Turkish language, had adopted the notion that the further east one travels, the purer forms of Turkic languages one finds. They were thus naturally interested in Soviet research on Central Asia. The Soviet Union, with its large Turkic population and an Orientalist tradition inherited from the Tsarist period, boasted many of the world's experts in Turkology, that is, the study of Turkic languages and cultures. Ankara's reformers also appreciated Soviet scholarship's reputation for criticizing the Eurocentrism of their Western colleagues. In 1932, Kemal approached Moscow's representative in Turkey and requested that the Soviet Union send 2 specialists to visit the recently founded Society for the Study of Turkish Language. Deputy Commissar of Foreign Affairs Lev Karakhan relayed Kemal's suggestion to the Soviet government, writing, quote, "The Turks do not have faith in Western scholars in light of their arrogant and disdainful attitude towards other nations." He continued, "We are extremely interested in using the authority of Soviet science to strengthen our cultural and political influence in Turkey." Unquote. For this mission, the Soviet state enlisted Nikolai Mar, the linguist and Renaissance man, and Alexander Samoilovich, an accomplished Turkologist. Samoilovich and Mar's arrival in Ankara met with great fanfare. For their part, the 2 linguists returned this enthusiasm by praising Turkey's activist scholars. The Soviets wrote to the Turkish education minister, quote, "The work on Turkish history and language, organized in Turkey on the state scale, is truly leading to a radical, indeed revolutionary, change in the teaching of these 2 humanitarian sciences." Upon his return home, Samoilovich approached the Soviet Academy of Sciences with a proposal for a permanent commission that would facilitate contacts between Soviet and Turkish scientists. Samoilovich's commission began operations in 1933 and acquired a dedicated secretary and bureau in 1934. In its first meetings, the commission laid out its goals. First, exchange publications and museum collections with Turkish institutions. Second, facilitate joint scientific expeditions, conferences, and written relations between Turkish and Soviet scientists. And third, popularize Turkish culture and history within the Soviet Union. Although the playing field for cooperation with Turkey was narrow, the commission members staked out their position in it, criticizing the All-Union Society of Cultural Relations, or Volks, for neglecting scientific exchange. Without the new group, they warned, coordination across the Black Sea would, quote, "easily fizzle out," unquote. The Commission's most enduring activity was a literature exchange with Turkish counterparts, who had earlier sent Mar and Samoilovich extensive wish lists of Soviet publications. The Commission corresponded with libraries and scholars across the Union to acquire these works. They then forwarded them to the Turkish Language Society, the Society for the Study of History, the University of Istanbul, the Ministry of Education, and Ankara's agricultural and mining institutes. Although the numbers are incomplete, and at least one shipment was misdirected to Vladivostok, between 1933 and 1936, the countries exchanged some 1,550 book copies written in a dozen languages. In addition to disseminating the research of Turkish and Soviet scholars, the Commission worked to get them in the same room and on the same page. Samoilovich and his deputy Ivan Meshaninov, Mar had died in 1934, presented at the Turkish Language Society's 2nd and 3rd conferences in Istanbul, and several Turkish delegations completed a reciprocal journey. Meanwhile, the Commission established an editorial board for a triannual dual-language publication to be titled the Soviet-Turkish Scientific Journal. The editors met in 1936 to discuss an eclectic lineup of subjects, including glowing descriptions of Turkey's scientific infrastructure, Samoilovich's study of the Turkish words for rich and poor, and articles on a range of natural science topics. To the extent that the Commission has been recognized as a player in Soviet-Turkish relations, it is for connecting Turkologists, or as a footnote in the history of Turkish language reform. Indeed, the packets circulating the Black Sea were stacked with Uyghur, Ancient Turkic, Chagatai, Yakut, Chuvash, and Mongol dictionaries, as well as copies and bibliographies of Central Asian and Ottoman manuscripts. However, the Commission's archive reveals that the organization's architects envisioned a much broader universe of cooperation. Beyond linguistics, this vision included history, ethnography, and archaeology, inspired by the entangled populations and geopolitics of the Ottoman and Russian empires. For instance, archives in Ukraine and Leningrad compiled guides to their materials on Russo-Turkish relations, and the Hermitage and other Soviet museums expressed their interests in exchanging collections and historical monuments with their Turkish counterparts. The 2 countries even floated joint excavations of Assyrian ruins in Kultepe and Bulgar sites in the Volga region. The staff of Leninka, the state library in Moscow, offered to teach Turkish colleagues their methods. As commission head, Samoilovich fielded dozens of proposals from his peers in the Academy of Sciences. Many of these projects never materialized, for reasons that will be discussed later, yet the enthusiasm expressed by Soviet scholars is noteworthy. Turkologists, of course, were fascinated with Turkey and its journey of self-discovery. This was a given. But what interest would natural scientists have in furthering their country's relationship with its southern neighbor? The answer, I argue, is the Black Sea environment they shared. Beyond Turkey's strategic foreign policy position, the countries adjacent to the Soviet Southwest led to a convergence in research topics. Water, coal deposits, seismic fault lines, climate, and soil composition transcended the region's political boundaries. Soviet scientists understood that studies of these phenomena, which stopped at the border, were necessarily incomplete. The Commission for the Promotion of Scientific Relations with Turkey was therefore an opportunity to gain a more holistic picture of the region, while demonstrating the international relevance and superiority of Soviet science. More prosaically, proposal writers likely saw the Commission as a means of tapping into funding at a time when collaboration with Turkey was a national priority. Let's begin with the agricultural proposals, which bore the imprint of each of these motivations. Speaking to the Commission in 1934, the agronomist Nikolai Vavilov, who later fell victim to the Lysenko affair, argued that Soviet biologists working in the Caucasus would benefit from exposure to eastern Anatolia. To Vavilov, the Zhukovsky expeditions had demonstrated the value and feasibility of this work. By gathering and preserving plant samples, including 50 types of wheat, the expedition had enriched the biological archive of Soviet laboratories, which, like their Turkish counterparts, were breeding drought-resistant varietals. Zhukovsky's surveys, however, did not reach Turkey's northeast, the landscape most analogous to those of the Soviet Caucasus. Likewise, in 1935, the All-Union Institute of Horticulture expressed its, quote, extreme interest, unquote, in visiting the region, and the Ukrainian Botanical Institute suggested that Transcaucasian trees and grasses might thrive in Turkey. The commission put Vavilov in touch with an agricultural school near Izmir, and his institute drafted a plan for a Soviet-Turkish agricultural festival that would visit Askanaya Nova, a nature preserve located north of Crimea. Meanwhile, the Geological Association proposed an in-depth study of the Black Sea coast soils in order to develop the Soviet and Turkish subtropics, the Soviet term for the region's climate. M. Katznelson, director of the Academy of Sciences Chemistry Association, stressed the untapped industrial and medical potential of Turkey's plants. With Soviet consultation, he argued, Turkey could harness the useful alkaloids found in its abundant poppy and tobacco crops to build a domestic, economically independent chemical sector. Katznelson requested that the commission translate his work into Turkish and provide him with Turkey's latest chemistry journals. The Academy of Sciences geologists boosted the value of comparative work across the Soviet Union and Turkey. The director of the Geological Institute contended that Soviet research could inspire Turkish industry to make better use of its non-metal mineral wealth. In particular, he expressed the value of exploring Turkey's coal deposits based on the theory that Ukraine's Donetsk Basin and northern Turkey's Zonguldak coal fields were geologically connected. The Lomonosov Institute requested that the commission sponsor a brigade of geologists to visit Asia Minor in 1936. The minerals collected, they argued, could be split between a new national mineralogical museum in Turkey and its sister institution in the Soviet Union. Anatolian materials would furnish Soviet scientists with a better understanding of the geochemical processes that characterize the Fergana Valley in Tajikistan. Related proposals crossed Samoilovich's desk, including from seismologists and geologists hoping that Turkish territory would be the key to understanding Crimea's earthquakes and Transcaucasia's mountain formations. As one proposal writer put it, quote, the incompleteness of research on the whole Black Sea Basin has left a slew of questions unsolved on tectonics, stratigraphy, and the genesis of various useful mineral deposits. Because the North Shore of Asia Minor is the least studied point and also the best for clarifying these questions, it is necessary to suggest the joint study of this region to the governments of the USSR and Turkey. Cooperation in astronomy, too, fell under the Commission's auspices. The Soviet State Astronomical Observatory had earlier sent instruments to a facility in Istanbul and expressed the desire to make use of Turkey's skies. The Soviets would provide instructions and the Turkish astronomers would execute them. The Moscow Astronomical Institute, studying the force of gravity on Soviet submarines, pitched a hexalateral network of gravimetric observatories with points in Erzurum and Constantinople, that is, Istanbul. Turkish-Soviet partnership, he hoped, would lay the groundwork for a geodesic commission of the Black Sea countries, modeled on a similar network in the Baltic. The Ukrainian Academy of Sciences also envisioned a new regional infrastructure, which would place a Soviet biological station on Turkey's Mediterranean coast. As hinted earlier, few of these natural science proposals left the drawing board. Neither did those on medicine, psychology, and demography. There are several reasons for this. Samoilovich and his fellows complained of their small budget, the fact that the Academy of Sciences moved from Leningrad to Moscow in 1934, away from the Commission, as well as Soviet publications' failure to include foreign language abstracts, thereby limiting their research to Russophones. Most detrimental, in Samoilovich's view, was Turkey's slowness in creating a sister commission to mirror his own. With no centralized partner, the Soviet Commission was forced to coordinate with individual organizations, ministries, and scholars, which gummed up lines of communication. As a consequence, no clean archival trail exists for the Turkish side, just fragments. Even these are useful, however, such as the Turkish Education Minister's report on Samoilovich's joint journal. Quote, although it has been said that this journal will be purely scientific, it cannot be predicted to what extent it will stay away from propaganda. Indeed, Samoilovich and his team generally downplayed their intellectual disagreements with Turkish academics, but these did flare up. At the Third Turkish Linguistics Conference, for instance, the Soviet delegation delivered a friendly rebuttal based in historical materialism against the quote-unquote Sun language theory, an idea popular among Ankara's nationalists, which posited that the first languages were Turkic. It seems, then, that at least some Turkish actors had reservations about their Soviet partners' ideological commitments, or resented that many of the Commission's proposals were framed unidirectionally, that is, highlighting what the Soviet side had to teach and the Turkish side had to learn. However, these bumps perhaps could have been evened out had it not been for circumstances outside of the Commission's control. Namely, the geopolitical winds that had propelled the Commission had shifted. At the 1936 Montreux Conference, which revisited the post-World War I legal regimes governing the Bosphorus and Dardanelles, Turkish and Soviet interests diverged. The two countries continued to trade and collaborate on industrial projects, but the rosy glasses that had colored Frunze's vision of an internal Black Sea had been taken off. The Commission's archive reflects these souring relations. It drops off after 1936. More research must be done to trace the Commission's last days, but the cruelty of Soviet domestic politics did not help. The Stalinist purges of the late 1930s swallowed many of the relationship's central Soviet players. Karakhan, then ambassador to Turkey, was arrested and shot in 1937. Samoilovich was also arrested that year, accused, strangely, of being a Japanese spy. He was executed in 1938. Historians differ on whether Samoilovich's relationship with Turkey contributed to his charge, but his profession almost certainly did. His Japanese minders, court documents declare, sought to manipulate Samoilovich's pan-Turkish sentiments against the Tsarist and then Bolshevik regimes. The Soviet-Turkish partnership broke down further after the 1939 Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which inaugurated one of the times of crises evoked in this conference's title. The Commission's active years were therefore brief, but still worth our reflection. First, they demonstrate the centrality of geopolitics in structuring scientific exchange in the mid-20th century, a precondition which enabled conversations on the Black Sea's shared environments, ethnic groups, and interwar social engineering projects. Second, these concerns persisted across the 1945 divide into the Cold War era. Hydrology, fish migrations, poppy alkaloids, information sharing networks, drought-resistant seeds. Each of these non-human border crossers continued to shape the region, albeit refracted through the geopolitical prism of the Black Sea's Cold War. This is the subject of my dissertation, and perhaps a topic for our conference's discussion. Finally, the Commission's proposals are interesting as signposts to paths not taken. Had the Black Sea's roiling crises unspooled differently, could these projects have come to fruition? If so, what does this tell us about the entanglement of science, geopolitics, and environment? Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your feedback.